What do you see?
You had the agenda.
All right. So this is basically what I'm thinking. Like in order to teach critical thinking, we have to understand what critical thinking is. And so we talk about what that is. We go through an open discussion, and then we go through some practical exercises. And the goal for me would be that you guys walk away with some things that you can bring back to your team that you can start implementing and you can start guiding them towards doing to help expand their critical thinking as well. So let's go to my first real slide. Critical thinking, a lesson in sarcasm, pain, and humiliation. What exactly does that mean? So this is the first thing that I'm going to turn into an open discussion. I need actual feedback. So Alan, Glenn, Jerry, Shimon, and Katrina and Kyle, you need to actually talk and discuss what I'm talking about so we can take apart what this means. Any commentary or thoughts about what the sentence, a lesson in sarcasm, pain, and humiliation, how it ties to critical thinking? Who wants to go first?
I do.
Go for it, Glenn.
It's the basics of your first week at Intellicomp asking Mendy a question and not having all the information.
Oh, but you stole my thing, Glenn. Thanks.
It's like,
well,
can you help me with this machine that I can't get to do whatever I'm trying to get to do? And the first question is, did you actually take a screenshot of it? Where's the ticket? And like, what have you tried? But yes, all valuable lessons.
Okay. Any other takes on what that sentence would mean? I mean, basically what it sounds like, Glenn, is you're telling me that I wield sarcasm and pain and humiliation as a way to teach a lesson, right? That's what I'm hearing.
I think you wield sarcasm and pain and accidentally cause humiliation in the crossfire.
Yeah.
No, it's not attributed to you. The humiliation comes from the point of like, why didn't I think of that? It's not like that you humiliated someone. It's like, oh, well, when someone explains
so like
it to
indirect humiliation.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's all indirect.
Self-imposed. Let's put it that. Self-imposed humiliation.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got for me, Shimon?
I'm not sure how they all fit in, but to a large extent, these are the tools that you use, maybe the markers in your brain when you're critically thinking, when you're trying to test ideas or feel for them. Like, does it really make sense? Seriously? Or it just feels wrong? Or I don't know what humiliation. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like these are what's going on in your head while you're trying to work it out. I mean, there's other things too, but these are the Pavlov's dogs part of it.
One of the most important things about critical thinking and about any situation that you're going to get into really is the mindset that you're in at the time. So this absolutely was purposely crafted for you to think about the way I behave personally. I know, like, I absolutely did wield sarcasm and sometimes pain and indirectly caused humiliation many times over my career. And I purposely put them in here so that you think about that. But in reality, it's completely unrelated. And these three things don't go together. They're three separate entities that relate to critical thinking. So the first one, sarcasm, that we'll talk about, actually is a bad thing to use. It actually causes a closed mindset. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to ask three different people to ask me for three different favors. You can ask me for anything. So someone go, ask me a favor. Whatever you want, anything in the world.
And convince them that they need to spend $100,000 and redo their entire system.
No, someone else go.
Can you go to Right Up Boom?
Maybe. One other question.
Can you change your background to penguins?
Can I do what?
Change your background to penguins?
Yes. The point of these three favors and the point of the answers was to give you that feeling of that closed and open mindset specifically. Obviously, Katrina, I apologize, it came out very bluntly, but the point was to show that when I say no, there's no more discussion. There's no recourse. There's nowhere to go. The conversation's over, right? And if this was a child asking for a candy before dinner, it would be no, and then you'd go like, why not? But the answer's still no, right? And then they try to like push and shove, and they have to get back behind the no in order to make progress. But that is basically a closed conversation at that point. And the same thing happens if I say yes, right? Yes, you achieved what you wanted. I said yes, I'm giving it to you. But there's no more discovery. There's nothing further to explore. When I said maybe, the answer becomes, well, okay, what do I need to do in order to actually turn this answer to a yes or no? Like, how do I get to the end? What is the cause of that maybe? And now we have to start discovering and figuring out what we need to do to move forward in this conversation. And so the maybe mindset, the middle ground, is the only mindset that actually helps you explore further. It's an open-ended thing. And so sarcasm as a mindset is a very dismissive mindset. It's a very closed mindset, and it prevents further exploration, right? So what we want to do is we want to encourage an open mindset. We want to encourage thought chaining, because basically the maybe leads, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to turn this into a yes? What was the question? Can I go to Right of Boom? Well, what would make me say yes? That's going to be the next thing. Well, I'll pay you X amount of money to go, or I'll cover for the ticket, or, I need you to go meet somebody for me, or something that you start chaining additional thoughts that will convince me to either go yes or no either way. And from there, you learn, number one, what I like to do, what I don't like to do, what'll make me go, and you start discovering things. So that's basically how the mindset takes place. So we're going to leave pain and humiliation. We're going to talk about those in a little bit. And we're going to move forward. So the next slide is basically, who am I, right? Everyone has, as a presenter, they've got like a about me slide. This is my about me slide. If you didn't ask the question, why am I the one talking to you about this? What gives me that right? Who am I? Then you've already started failing. Even though you know who I am, even though, here's a list of things that I've done, here's a list of accomplishments, it doesn't make a difference, right? The bottom line is that just because you know me does not mean that I know what I'm talking about on a specific topic or any topic, right? The things that give me that right, so to speak, is your past experience, the things that I say, if it makes sense to you, right? So you're supposed to be making from your own judgment call based off of what I say and how the things that I do, whether or not I actually know what I'm talking about in those topics or situations. And so the only way for you to actually do that is for you to basically be paying attention to what I'm saying, right? If you're just taking me at face value, it's a closed mindset. If you're, well, I don't know what this guy is, or I don't know what he's saying, or I don't know why he's saying it, but if I listen and see if what he's saying makes sense, then maybe I can make that decision, right? So we're still in the maybe I don't know mindset, and that's what allows you to then make an informed decision on whether or not the things that I'm saying, or what you're seeing makes sense. If you don't pay attention, you have no way of doing that. You're already in that closed mindset.
And you're also in a closed mindset because we assume we know you really well because you work for us. We assume we know anything and everything that you've done. But there's something on this list I didn't know.
What's that?
You're paranoid.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the things on this list, right? So number one, over 1,000 hours of consulting this year. I've actually done more than that. I actually don't really know what the number is. I did some quick math. I've reached over 1,000. I just wrote that down. That surprised me. I don't know why people listen to me. I have talked a lot about critical thinking with various different people. I've given 3 or 4 different trainings on critical thinking. I'm very passionate about that I know. But I also feel like I make up 80% of the things that I say. And I'm very surprised when I go actually look things up to be like, oh, hey, that actually makes sense or checks out, or confirmation about something that I was saying that was actually right. But I'm wrong more often than I'm right. What?
When we were training, you, me, and Amari, you were describing how to ping a network out to find where the problem is. Go to here, then here to here. And I look at you, I'm like, this is exactly what they say in the Cisco books. You're like, oh, okay.
Cool.
Yeah, never read the Cisco books.
I wouldn't.
But yeah, I'm wrong more often than I'm right. And it doesn't mean that the things that I'm telling people is wrong more often than I'm right. It means that the things that I think about and the things that I assume is wrong more often than I'm right. And that's true. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. And we'll talk about why in a moment. I'm forever learning everything that I don't know anything, right? That's the point. I'm always looking things up. I'm always learning more. And I'm paranoid. What am I paranoid about? I'm paranoid in the classical sense that I feel like someone's out to get me. I'm not paranoid to the extent of like I lock and bar my doors and I'm hiding behind curtains and whatever. Yeah, I'm not. It's not extreme. The extreme paranoia comes in when I feel like I'm wrong, right? And it directly relates to feeling like I'm wrong more often than I'm right. And in fact, I actually am, which helps my paranoia. But that paranoia helps me go and check myself to make sure that what I'm saying
keeps you grounded,
right? It keeps me grounded. It keeps me verifying what I'm saying and rationalizing everything that's going on to see, to make sure that it's right before I actually talk about it. I'm uncertain, right? It ties into the paranoia. I'm a rule breaker. If I wasn't a rule breaker, I would not be as successful. Not that I am successful, but I would not be as successful as whatever I am right now. The rule breaker in me is what actually allows me to take, even in a closed mindset, and still break past it, right? Because oftentimes the rules are what give you that closed mindset. Oh, you can't do X, Y, Z. Well, why not? Right? That why not gives you that opening again to start figuring things out. If I wasn't a rule breaker, I would be an acceptant. I would accept those rules, and I would be like, oh, well, I guess I can't do it, and just move on.
Someone would have to prove you to that rule can be broken before you would actually move past
it. Exactly.
And that's a problem.
And I'm curious
because I follow rules, and I struggle with that constantly.
I don't know if you follow rules, but we'll go along with that.
I'm more of a rule follower than a rule breaker. That better?
Sure, I'll take that. So we're gonna do a simple thought exercise here. Another one. We have a new accounting package.
Oh God.
Technician has spoken to the customer. Customer is requesting. The technician goes to install the accounting package and runs into a problem. So now the technician is talking to their team lead, and they go, technician says, customer is requesting we install their new accounting package that they need ASAP. I tried installing it, but I'm getting a message that a pending reboot is required. Can we reboot the server? And Lita goes, oh, sure, just reboot it right now. All right, so who wants to take this? Like, what happened here? Like, is this real? Is this sarcastic? Is it not sarcastic? Should we reboot? Like, what are the possible outcomes for this scenario? Someone go. Go for it, Kyle.
In text-based form, I would read it as being sarcastic. If that was said to me, generally I like to assume positive intent. So I'd be like, oh sure, yeah, you can go ahead and reboot it right now. And I wouldn't make that same decision as that lead without more information. I feel like there's a lot of context I'm missing.
In this role, you're the technician.
Okay.
Right. So in this role, you're the technician, and the lead, you don't have a choice about what he says to you.
Okay.
Right. So what is the outcome in this ticket, so to speak? If you're the technician and he says that, what are you doing?
I'm rebooting the server.
Okay. And then what happens? Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, the server doesn't come back online, and I have to go and manually rebuild a VM. Hopefully it's a VM.
What are the possibilities for that worst case scenario happening? Like, why would that happen?
Multiple instances. We don't know why it's a pending reboot. We don't know if there's updates installed. Could be blue screening from updates. Could be the software itself is causing issues because there's a conflict somewhere. There's a myriad of different things that's going to pop up with a pending reboot that I don't know because I didn't cause the pending reboot that I'm aware of.
Someone other than Kyle. We need some more interaction on this exercise. Give me worst case scenarios. What would happen? What should happen? Where does this ticket end up?
I mean, worst case scenario, I mean, obviously the server dying, that's always possible. The client losing work, productivity in the middle of the day, those are all possible.
Shimon, would you, if
you
were the technician, would you have rebooted the server if you were the technician?
Well, no, I wouldn't have, because it seems like the lead is just throwing out a response, likely on Teams, right? He's not really taking responsibility for what the whole picture is, and so I may need to give him more, or just do my own thinking myself about this. Meaning,
so
to ask the question, can we reboot the server? So that doesn't get into the factors of yes, why, or yes, not reboot the server at all, right? And the lead isn't expressing that either. So like I'm just kind of trusting his hopeful judgment, but if he's just not really paying attention or he's being sarcastic, then
you're to be honest, Shimon, though, you're setting that lead up for failure. Because you're saying that a pending reboot is you're giving them information as the technician that says
that's a good point. Yes.
I have done everything. We need to reboot. Can I reboot?
But am I saying that I've done everything, or am I just a level 1 technician who's following rules and running their routine, and then passing exactly what happened off to the lead?
Ultimately, this is going to come back on the lead, whether they meant it as a sarcastic reply or they were being serious. It's going to be on their head if something did go wrong. But in this scenario, I think the technician should verify, are you being serious, or what? The customer really needs this installed and it's going to need a restart. Do we have to wait till the end of the day, or what? If the lead continues,
maybe you shouldn't ask yes, no question.
And you'll let the customer know this is what you'll be looking at. The server is going to restart. You'll be down for at least this much. Hopefully, there's no issues.
Do we spot anything else wrong with this scenario that happened here, even from the technician's perspective?
We didn't run through a change request.
Didn't run through a change request. What would that have prevented, or what would that have helped, or what would that do? What would that look like?
We'd have, according to our current change management process, we'd have to spell out the steps we would be taking inside of the report. That would mean we can go through the full list of not only the steps that the software is hopefully providing, and we're not just assuming things, but it have a second set of eyes to look at what we're doing to make sure that as a level 1 technician, if that's what I'm assuming I am, I'm doing the right steps.
Go for it, Katrina. Though you're on mute.
I was going to say something similar, that we don't know if updating the accounting package, if it affects other users who have the existing package. So
yeah. And so I was actually just going to question Kyle, because I was like, are we going to run the change request because we have the process to run a change request, or like what's the point of running that change request? And then Katrina, you basically answered that, or some of it. So that was good. What were you saying, Shimon?
I would say also that the technician is kind of being put under pressure by the client because they said it needs to be installed ASAP. And so to deal with that, he's doing some other acute, possibly dangerous, let's use the word possibly dangerous thing. So if you're gonna really, maybe it comes down to the client or what the client actually wants or needs. Maybe it's a discussion with them, or maybe you have to think about it yourself. What's more important, installing the server, installing the software, or rebooting the server? Meaning there are consequences to one, consequences to the other, right? One, you don't get the installed ASAP. Well, what's more important? Do you want to do that? Do you want to take down email because it's an SPS server, right?
So if we're considering this scenario in terms of the leads applying critical thinking, then the lead is completely wrong here.
It's true. He did not. Well, you don't know
completely
what went into
wrong.
It. If
or
he
is
knows
the lead
everything
being sarcastic
and still answering,
and he's not.
Yeah, there's unknown information that we don't have.
Yeah.
Is this like? Are we assuming this is a Teams message, or are we assuming this is like in verbally?
You're leaving it up assumption to the technician if you're closing that conversation out right there. They could easily assume you're closing. And assumptions are always
Just because it's a yes.
The worst thing that you could end up with, the worst thing that any technician can do, or any lead can do, anybody on any level in an MSP, the worst thing you can do is assume. And you're leaving it up to the technician to assume with that kind of response that you just closed that. In terms of what Mindy just discussed previous to this, you just closed that conversation out, and no further thought needed by the technician.
Well, also that is 100%
How many
sarcasm.
times a day? How many times a day do we think this happens? Maybe not exactly this scenario.
And how many technicians do you know that can't read sarcasm, Kyle?
Every single one of them.
Exactly. So it's terrible. You can't do that.
That's why I do sarcasm in DMs, and that was sarcasm immediately after it.
But the technician also, by rephrasing the question, could also stave this off, or do a lot to stave it off.
Well,
meaning he's asking a yes no question, right?
We're putting a lot of emphasis on an untrained individual as well.
This is the opportunity that Minnie is talking about keeping the conversation open and saying, well, what would be the problem with that? And then making the technician think for a response. Okay, well, it would cause them to go down. Maybe I should let them know. Is there anything else going on that might cause a problem with this restart? Is there any other critical stuff running on this server that is going to affect other things? And it's an opportunity to teach.
That's a good point, Jerry. Yeah, good point. And from my perspective, going back to the change request thing, it doesn't even have to be like we're falling onto policy at that point, but we don't even have to do that. We can just ask them point blank, why did you even try installing this package? Right? Like, literally, he's like, I tried installing it. Well, why? I mean, like, what, did you talk to anyone before you tried doing that? And again, like that delivery needs to be tailored to something that's not sarcastic, painful, or humiliating. But that's the bottom line, is like, we want to ask that question, why? I also want to point out like the conversation that we just had, right? So the open discussion we just had about that tabletop, that was more valuable than the tabletop itself. That open thinking, that constant brainstorming, that's what we talk about when we say like chaining thoughts together or brainstorming. Like, this is where critical thinking comes out. And you don't need someone else to do it. It's easier to do it with somebody else. And you won't come off insane if you do it with somebody else, but you can do it by yourself. Thinking things out loud or in your head or writing it down will allow you to start brainstorming essentially with yourself. Situations of what could go wrong, kind of like what Jerry was saying, ask the technician. You can ask that to yourself. The rubber duck method, Alan, exactly.
I love the rubber duck.
This is a tool that developers use when they get stuck in a situation. They take this rubber duck off of their desk and they explain what they're doing and what they're running into to the rubber duck. And the method of talking it through usually helps them solve whatever they're stuck on, because it allows them to transform the problem from something in their head to something they can actually quantify, and then they usually see the problem at that point. It's the same exact thing, right? That's critical thinking.
I would recommend doing it with your technicians if you can, because Mendy's done it,
100%.
Andrea's done it. That's how I learned all of my core troubleshooting skills in IT, was from the sergeant that I would watch over his shoulder, and who constantly did his troubleshooting out loud. And it was the most helpful thing to me in my whole career, just listening to him and watching him mouse around and everything. Yeah.
I would always recommend you rubber duck with someone else if they have time. Don't
I even do it with customers just so that they don't sit in silence wondering what I'm doing, especially when you're going back and forth on logs and trying to duplicate something, and it's helpful to them too. Obviously, don't.
The number of times I had to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself," because they would be like, "Wait, what? What are you saying?" I'm like, "No, I'm just talking. I'm just talking to myself. Don't mind me." And then you basically work through the problem. Like, "Oh, let's see, we got this, and we got that, blah blah blah." And you're basically reading what you're seeing, or you're thinking it through. Yeah, but don't say that.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's the code word for it doesn't work. Everything's going to crap.
Exactly. So the point is, sarcasm. Don't use it. It is a closed-minded thing. I'm not saying don't use it in your life. But it's basically in order for you to use it, you have to separate the mindset of the sarcasm, the dismissiveness, from your use of it, and using it in a situation that mindset can't be separated. So if you're talking externally to someone who's coming to ask you a question about what to do, like that's not a good time to use it. If you're using it yourself, it can also impact your own thinking. So if someone comes up to you and says, well, we're having this problem, and maybe it's this, and then you basically like, oh, well, it can't be that, because you're sarcastically dismissing it, either because of the person who suggested it or because of your past experience. You're basically overlooking a potential cause of the actual problem, and you're dismissing what the symptom is and part of the problem that you're going to need in order to really solve it. And so that sarcastic response, even internally, can be harmful to your problem solving. So bottom line is don't use it. This is similar to at the gym. They tell you, like, as a beginner, when you're doing fighting classes, they tell you don't do certain things. And then when you get more advanced, like, okay, now you can do it, right? When you get to a level of being able to separate that mindset from the use of sarcasm and how and when the right time to use it, then by all means, go ahead and use it again. But honestly, like, I don't know anyone at that level. I myself, I talk about critical thinking a lot. I use sarcasm a lot. I mix the two up. I miss things all the time. I'm very good at teaching someone how to do it, but when it comes to doing it, I probably miss it about half the time.
Do as I say, not as I do.
What?
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly. So bottom line, this is just as much a lesson for myself as it is for everyone else. Don't use sarcasm, ideally. I don't have any notes on this slide.
I disagree a little bit on that one.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So I know you get brought up as having taught people stuff all the time. And some of what is brought up is you made someone feel stupid and then they remembered in the future. And some of the way you do that is sarcasm. And I do think that there are technicians who, when you give them a sarcastic answer and they realize it's sarcastic, it may cause them to go back and think and actually learn something and remember a lesson that they wouldn't have necessarily learned if you had have held their hand and walked them through it. Now, it is very
there
specific
has to be some middle place,
to specific technicians. Yeah, I mean, if you're just constantly being sarcastic all the time, you're just going to be a jerk. Like, that's how it goes. But it's a tool you can use with certain technicians that definitely helps. And I think a lot of us in this meeting respond fairly well. I know me and Jerry specifically
but that's
respond well to that.
That's something you get from
definitely
educating and working with your technicians. That's building a trust relationship with them. So if you go to them, like if Mindy if Mindy was sarcastic to me when I asked him a question, I would tell him to stop being mean and give me the actual answer. Because we have that type of relationship, right? I wouldn't mean any of that. Like it would just be a back and forth. Like, and I understand what you're saying, but that's not necessarily the core of what Mindy's saying. Is you should at any point in time you should not initially use sarcasm unless you. I wouldn't even. That'd be no unless. I would not initially use sarcasm
unless you were gonna use it to explain the situation. Like, oh, sure, yeah, let's go ahead and restart right now and bring them down without even telling them. Maybe, as long as it's very clear that it's sarcasm, and I think ultimately it's got to be used to soften a situation that could make them stupid.
But see, that goes back to text-based communication. You can't assume how someone's going to read something. Because I did this with Mindy last night. He was like, he sent me a screenshot of this, and I was like, I love it. And I'm like, oh wait, and then I emphasized like, I love this slide so much. Like I italicized it so you'd see the emphasis and the sarcasm I was giving him. But see, you can't assume how someone's going to read it. Vocally, sure. It's much easier to convey sarcasm and you're not intent, but text-based, never do it.
Yeah, so this is all great discussion. And I'm going to go back to what Alan was saying initially, right? So it is a fantastic teaching tool. There's no question about it. If the delivery of the sarcasm is achieved properly, it is a fantastic teaching tool. Why is it a fantastic teaching tool? It's because pain. Some of the best lessons in life are taught through pain. There's a difference in different kinds of pains. We've got emotional pain. We've got physical pain. We've got some pain that don't actually hurt, but it is painful. Like, for example, you talk about going through a painstaking exercise. Does that mean, okay, it actually hurt? No, not necessarily. It was just tedious, right? It was it was a lot of effort to do. And so it's still pain, but it's not hurtful pain. What we call at the gym self-correcting mistakes, right? So at the gym, you punch yourself in the face because your form is a little bit off, or you miss a target, you hit a wall, and you smash your hand somewhere, right? These are self-correcting mistakes. You're never going to do that again. Why? Because the pain that came out is something you don't want to happen, especially if it's something like punching yourself in the face when trying to do an uppercut. What actually ends up happening is, number one, you hurt yourself, and number two, it's embarrassing, right? And so that humiliation gets you twofold, and you're never doing that again. So the self-correcting mistakes that exist, these are some things that you learn as a child, right? Sticking your finger in a light socket. Unless you're a sociopath, you're not doing that again. Touching a hot stove, getting burnt playing with fire, right? Unless you're a pyromaniac, you're just gonna stop playing with fire at that point. These are things that actually hurt. This is hurtful pain. Failure, humiliation, being proven wrong. Failure is actually something that's not necessarily a hurtful pain. It can hurt when it's paired with humiliation or being proven wrong. Being proven wrong is actually a combination of humiliation and failure, right? So that's hurtful. But for the most part, pain is a fantastic teacher. And sarcasm brings that pain. So that conversation that we were talking about is really good conversation. But the bottom line is that there are other ways for you to bring that lesson across that doesn't have to result in sarcasm. And there are other negative aspects about sarcasm as well. So going back to what I was saying about from a beginner versus an advanced user perspective, right? Don't use sarcasm unless you're able to properly manage the impact it's going to cause, both on your own psyche and on the psyche of the person you're using it with. And that's really hard. It does depend on the relationship, and it does depend on your experience and your delivery and the method of communication and all the various situations that are in there. And also, by the way, the word don't, that's a closed mindset. So don't listen to me when I say that. That's also a closed mindset. Everything is it depends. We're looking for a middle ground here. We're looking for balance. The situation is going to tell you exactly how and when to do it. And what you should be doing is constantly thinking about, is this the right time? How is this going to play out? Thought exercises are basically pretend something is going to happen and play that scenario through all the way to the end with as many possibilities as possible, right? And that thought exercise will, number one, prepare you for the situation if you run into it. And number two, will allow you to explore and discover things that you may not have thought of because it didn't happen until you pretended it happened or until it happens for real, right? Does that make sense?
I initially think of like to develop something like this with your teams, right? You want to have a scenario that you can run through them and demonstrate how to think critically about situations. Like the first initial thought of a good acronym or analogy would be like when you are watching Wheel of Fortune, right? And they put up the board and it's just nothing but blank spaces. However, only so many phrases can fit in that blank space, but you're not predetermined to what that could be, right? You have to go through the different checks. You have to check, is there an S? Is there a W? You have to parse out until you start to figure out what the actual puzzle ends up being.
Yeah, I don't have any comments on that because I don't watch Wheel of Fortune. But it sounds good. The figuring things out, right? That like what you're talking about, that is literally what we want to do. And again, that having that open to possibilities is that mindset that we're looking to go into. I do have some exercises coming up on things that are ways that you can start fostering that within your team and within yourself. So we can talk about what that looks like in a moment. But to properly think critically is to accept that you're wrong and actively prove it, right? So if we think about that balance we're trying to maintain here, if you come up with a theory about something and you say, you know what, I'm probably right, let's go prove that I'm right. You are unbalanced at that point. You are firmly on the side of being right, and you're going to constantly try to prove yourself right over and over again. And your mind is going to start giving you biases that say, oh, if you do X, Y, Z, it'll be right, and it'll prove that you're right. Oh, let's see. And it's going to skew the tests that you're going to come up with to verify that you're right, because it wants you to prove yourself right, because that's something that feels good, and it's something that you shy away from. You shy away from failure because it hurts. What we want to do is we want to define the specifics of what it is that you're thinking. Like, even if it's an assumption, it's not really a fact at that point. You don't know it for sure. You're guessing. You want to define what it is that guess is, and then start building a set of tests to prove yourself wrong, not prove yourself right. You want to invalidate your thinking. And what you're doing here now is you're saying, I have one thought on the side of right, and now I'm going to try to actively prove it wrong on the other side. And you're balancing that out. What that does is you are not going to shy away from being wrong, because being wrong means you are right. You're assuming that your thinking is wrong, and you're going to prove that it's wrong. Does that make sense? Like, it's kind of meta at this point. What you're doing is you're saying, if I think I'm right and I'm constantly trying to prove myself right, I'm going to shy away from the areas that'll prove me wrong, because I don't want to face the fact that I'm a failure. But if you say, well, I wonder if it's X, Y, Z, and it's probably not, let's make sure it's not. Now you're always right. Doesn't matter if you end up right or wrong. You yourself, your psyche is right. And so your mental mind, your mindset at that point, is not going to bias you against proving yourself wrong, because it wants to prove yourself wrong, because that means you're right about it being wrong. This is like all kinds of confusing. Anyone with me here?
This is where I'd like to point out when those very, very sweet moments where I'm right on something and Mindy is wrong. Though I take that this enlightens me much more, because the way you when you go at something and you're assuming you're wrong regardless, eventually you're always going to be right that you're wrong. So it's nice to be able to be the person who's right before you are. So
okay,
my head hurts.
I'm glad I was able to make you feel good. Yeah, your head hurts, right? This is something, by the way, that is a valid thought exercise. Your philosophers, they like talking about time travel or the butterfly effect, right? It's a pointless thought exercise, because there's no real right answer. But the point isn't to have an answer. The point is to discover what could be possible and expand your potential, your broaden your mind, as they say in Harry Potter movie 3. Cast yourself into the future. Trelawney, you want to broaden your horizon, because that's basically how you do it. It's just thinking about possibilities that may or may not be true. They may not even be potential, real physical possibilities, but just going down that path will expand your creativity and thinking. And we also want to keep testing until you exhaust all methods of proving yourself wrong. That's actually from the scientific theory, but scientific method. But in reality, in practical real life, when you're not a scientist and you're trying to solve a problem for a customer, you don't need to get the exact answer. You just need to make the problem that they're facing go away. And so usually I focus around at least three tests. Copying the, 3 is the shape of a triangle. There's 3 points, and triangle is the strongest geometric shape, and triangulation tells you an approximate location. So 3 data points from different areas that'll actually allow you to determine or get closer to what's really going on. So what is an example of 3 types of tests from different data points? Like, what does that mean? These are all like non-practical terms. Anyone want to give a shot at what I'm talking about, or examples of what that would mean?
If you have the specifics, right? Test and verify that it's the specific. It all depends on the context of the individual, but there are multiple facets to test against a hypothetical or a educational guess, educated guess.
Yeah,
it just
any
depends on the
situation would have something.
Yeah.
So I actually have a practical situation that I can explain and give you an example. Let's say someone calls in, a customer calls in, the internet's slow, right? This happens all the time. How do we start figuring out where the issue is? So for me, I go, okay, who's complaining? Log into their computer and test the internet. What am I doing? Am I testing the internet for real? I don't believe you, so I'm going to test the internet? Or am I starting to establish what the problem is, right? I need hard data. The customer telling me that the internet is slow is subjective. I need an objective data point. So I log into the computer of the person who's complaining, because I'm most likely to get that data point from that computer. And I do a speed test, or I do a latency test on the internet. And I see, sure enough, if I'm pinging google.com, my latency is 1,000 milliseconds or higher. And so now I definitely see that the problem is there. I have an objective data point that tells me that the internet is slow. What is my next test I'm going to perform to start determining where the issue is? Any guesses?
Well, you've said it. You're trying to determine where the issue is. So you pick another location, which will either eliminate or show that the issue is here versus there. So
okay,
either pick another machine and do the same thing, or pick another target.
Okay, so I pick another target.
Or a target somewhere along the line.
So you're giving me a lot of ors now,
yeah,
right? I need to narrow down. I need to narrow down where I'm doing. So if I pick another target, Microsoft.com, and I ping Microsoft.com, and I come back with a 3,000 or 4,000 millisecond response time, what have I learned?
The issue is still present within the line that you're in.
Has that test been helpful to me, or is it?
You haven't learned a huge amount. You eliminated one small possibility that was just Google.com having the trouble and not Microsoft or whatever, something along the lines.
From the perspective of triangulation and data points, I basically went here and then I went like right here, right? If you can see my fingers, I don't know if you can see them, right? It's not really helpful. Sure, I've established it's not this one, it's this one, but everything along that line hasn't really done anything for me, right? I don't know, is it the computer? Is it the internet? Is it the website? Is it
the
routing across the internet? We don't know. We haven't done anything to actually narrow it down. So what we want to do is we want to cross that data point with a different data point that's perpendicular or something like that. And I'll explain what that means. Now that I'm on this computer and I've confirmed google.com is a problem, 1,000 milliseconds, my next step would be, okay, let me try pinging the router. The far end router of the device that I control on the network is their sonic wall. Let me ping their sonic wall. And my latency there is less than a millisecond. Right, so now I have a data point to google.com and I have a data point to across the network. And the machine is in the middle. And now I've confirmed that from the computer to the router, it's less than a millisecond, which tells me what?
That it's the promise from the router and outward.
That the issue with this machine seems to be happening from the router and onward, right? But there could still be a problem on the machine itself communicating with the internet, potentially with that specific target. There could be a problem beyond the internet connection itself. Like, we don't know. We've now basically established the issue happening from after the router, which is still within our control, the internet provider, or anywhere after that, right? And so then we start having to figure out how else we can establish that the issue isn't with this machine, or the issue isn't with the internet provider specifically, or maybe the issue is with the internet provider specifically. And we have to start drawing up tests that will continue to cross things off sectionally as opposed to parallel to figure out what's happening, right? And these are the data points to start establishing that are when I say 3 different types of data points, that's what I talk about, to start figuring out what's going on. So then I would go to a different computer and perform the same exact tests. Confirm internal network communication is perfect. Internet is not perfect. And so therefore, the problem is not with one machine, it's with multiple machines. The issue is likely to be something on the internet side or farther. And then we start picking different geographically placed internet targets. So google.com, Microsoft may not be good. They may be in the same region. They may be in the same data center. Maybe pick a different client, right? Pick a client that's on the same block as you. pick a client that's on a different provider or on the same provider and start figuring things out from different data points to start sectioning off areas that could potentially be the problem. Because even though it's outside of your control, the more information that you gather in your troubleshooting will allow you to pass that information off to the provider. Yeah, and they can help narrow down the issue. Does that all make sense?
Correct. Just at some point, and that's maybe sooner than you've stopped, right? Like you said, you don't necessarily need to solve the problem yourself. You just need to make the problem go away for the client, right?
Exactly.
So therefore, at a certain point, you don't necessarily need to test from this client, and like get enough information and do trace routes and go back to Comcast and say you have a problem between router X and router Q.
Yeah, exactly. The issue is like, again, the goal that we're looking for here is to get the customer's issues resolved. But at some point, like that may end up being the long game, right? Short game may be to get them back up and running. Maybe it's like you realize there's something with the internet provider, swap the WANs around, they're back up and running. Do you close that ticket? No, you don't. You still have to go back and make sure that the other internet connection gets resolved, open that ticket, do your due diligence before you can close that ticket you have on your desk. We only do have like 4 minutes left, so I'm going to go through the next slide real quick. This is just basically what I was talking about before. Testing to prove yourself right is a bias, right? Working to try to prove yourself correct, that you're right about something, is a bias, and it's going to work against you. Subconsciously, your brain will want to fall into the easiest ways to prove yourself right because we shy away from failure. And then the humiliation, think about the humiliation that's going to happen. If you go and put in all this effort and you prove yourself right 10 times, 100 times, you're like, you know what, this is 100% fact, and you go talk about it in public and some guy gets up and says, you're wrong because of this one test that you didn't think about because you were working to prove yourself right and not to prove yourself wrong. That humiliation is going to hurt. It's going to burn. And that humiliation is going to prevent you. It's going to be more like a sticking your finger into the fire or touching a hot stove or electrical outlet, and it's going to smack you down, and it's going to make you less likely to want to get back up again, right? The beauty of video games, by the way, I think I actually have that later. We'll just keep going real quick. Some practical exercises. This is just a cover slide, not much, but here. There are 3 basic points about critical thinking. Communication is a problem, is one of them. This goes into like mindset. The biggest communication problem is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. This is a quote from somebody who wrote it in a fantastic book I haven't read. But bottom line, pay attention to what is happening, right? I always said this, read the entire screen, right? There's things that are going on. If you're always looking to the next ticket, you're always looking to, actually I have a slide. This is on a slide, hold on. Here. You'd rather have a full-ass job done than 2 half-assed jobs, bottom line, right? If you're always looking at the next ticket, you miss what's happening to the ticket in front of you. You have no idea what's going on. You don't know what they're telling you. If you're looking for the solution instead of at the problem, you're likely to miss what's happening. And then even when the journey is short. So for example, I gave Kyle an example of this once, the password reset tickets. Right?
I listened to you do a password reset ticket.
It is not just a run-of-the-mill ticket that you just go and reset the password.
Phenomenal work.
Like each password reset ticket is a potential for you to learn more about what's going on. You always have a new scenario that you can learn from, even though it's a very basic ticket. Even if the journey is short and the answer is obvious, there are lessons that we can learn from that we miss if we're not paying attention. Right? Bottom line is the mindset on that communication that we have to do. That's the first thing that we want to try to work on. So next we have the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity is its own reason for existing. This is another quote written by somebody else on a book that I haven't read. Always be curious. Start with why. That's another fantastic book written by Simon Sinek that I also have only partially read. I have a lot of books to read on my plate.
Me too. I have that one I read.
Start with why. The idea is like that why will hook you and will give you that that drive and engagement to push forward. Starting with why is also a great concept for critical thinking. When we talk about doing an analysis or root cause analysis or anything we talk about like that, we say we should be asking why at least 5 times, like a child. You know, can I have a candy? No. Why not? Because I said so. But why did you say so? Because blah, blah, blah. But why? But why? But why? But why? Right? It's very annoying. But that's what you should be doing. We should be getting to the root cause of what they're trying to do. And it's not because we want to be dismissive, right? So if we go back to the tabletop exercise about the accounting package, we should be asking, why do you need it right now? You know, why didn't you tell us that you needed it before? And we're not trying to get the customer in trouble. We're not trying to make them feel bad. We're trying to understand context here so that we can figure out what is it that we need to do, right? Some of the things that we talked about in that conversation, I didn't bring it up. You guys brought up about, like, is it needed right now? What's the business case? You know, is it worth rebooting right now and causing that outage so that we can install it? In order for us to answer those questions, we need to understand the whys about what's going on, right? So these are all good things, but the way you get to them is by asking that why over and over and over again and being that annoying child. And then finally, fail early, fail often, but always fail forward. Love this quote. Failure in a video game encourages you to try again and again until you succeed. Right? So that's failure, that's pain that you're learning from. This goes back to, Alan, what we were talking about with sarcasm. Sarcasm is pain that hurts. And yeah, it's a great teacher, but it also is equivalent to putting your hand on a hot stove. And what are the chances of you trying that again to seeing if it's hot versus just not trying it again and just looking at something else to see if it's hot, right? So the problem with that is that if it's delivered incorrectly or too harshly, you're more than likely to beat the person down as opposed to helping them build themselves up. So yeah, it is a great tool, and when used correctly, by all means, go for it. But be aware of how that impacts the person.
Mistakes also have a similar repercussions. As a touching a hot plate. Like, I've never deleted a terminal server after the first one I deleted.
Yeah, but that could have also been like, oh, I just basically lost the client a lot of money and I'm leaving the IT world and I'm never touching it again because it's too scary. Right? The level of impact that makes can directly translate into what that, depending on who that person is. And so you just be aware of that. We want to celebrate those mistakes and learn from them. And the way you do that is because in a video game, basically, that failure is not a hurtful failure. It's not a hurting pain, but there's also that desire to achieve that the oxytocin that hits you when you accomplish a level, right? When you successfully solve a problem, when you close that ticket and the customer goes, "Thank you so much, you saved my life." And even if they're being, not literal when they say that, it's still a good feeling to have that. And so we want to remind them of that. We want to push them to getting that feeling and understand, like, the failure happens, but you learn from it and you move forward and you constantly try to pass that level again, always trying to level up. Here's a couple of ways you can build your critical thinking. This is the end of the presentation. This is the last slide that we have. I want to thank you for your time. Games 100% are helpful, and try to make them games that don't feel like school. Nobody likes school. If they do like school, you probably don't have a problem with them learning critical thinking. So you want to give them games that they can enjoy playing, that gives them that level of pleasure so that they can try to push again and again, and then they have to figure their way out in it. Clue or Cluedo is a really old classic board game. It's available online. I did this with Glenn on a call once. It's a lot of fun to play, and it helps with your critical thinking. Those stupid puzzle games, like find the differences between images, they require you to pay attention, right? You got to start looking and focusing, and expands your awareness and that mindset. Bejeweled and Tetris are puzzle games that seem fun, but they actually do help with your critical thinking and your reaction time and where to place things and strategy and so on and so forth. Logic puzzles are ones I used to do all the time with Shimon and Omari back in the day, right? And again, they help you as well. But there are also other things that you can do. Capture the flag events, right? These are fantastic events. These are basically where you have a problem, and in order to solve it, in order for you to pass the level, you have to grab a flag or a string or something that's only revealed after you solve a problem. And so capturing that flag and submitting it will allow you to get to the next question, will get you to the next level, but you do it through solving problems. And you can do it through their security capture the flags, which is what they're traditionally known for. And that's where you basically have to hack your way into something, break a password, or log into a system you're not supposed to log into, and retrieve a value from that system. The PICO CTF, PICO, they have great beginner ones, and they teach you about the technology as you go through them. You learn things about how like web servers work and Linux servers and memory analysis and things like that will help you in your career on that technical side while also teaching you critical thinking. Huntress has a security CTF, and CyberDrain has a technology CTF geared towards MSPs. They designed a CTF for MSPs, giving you real life tickets to solve and flags you have to capture from those tickets. And then finally, performing a root cause analysis on tickets. You can take any ticket and ask those 5 questions, and you can do it as a team exercise. Get everyone together, pick a ticket, pick 2 tickets, and go through it. Yes, Alan, I can get you the websites for these 100%. Doing it as a team, even having like weekly competitions to see who can score the highest on a Bejeweled or Tetris game, or constantly switching up which games, or doing like logic puzzles together. These are all ways that you can also help build your team culture and get yourselves more engaged together while also building that critical thinking. Again, open discussions, that brainstorming with other people, that's the easiest way to do it. It's the most natural way to do it. And it gets you into the habit of doing that critical thinking while you're having that open discussions. And that's basically it. And if you have no questions, I will see you all later.
Thanks for the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, no problem, guys. Have a great day.
Have a good one, everybody.